This is the Waupaca Area Public Library's Lunch and Learn.
And now we are ready for our Lunch and Learn, and I'm going to introduce Tracy Barron. She's the director of the Waupaca Historical Society, and she brought friends today.
Hello. Like Patsy said, I am Tracy Barron. I'm the director at the Waupaca Historical Society. Some of you may also know me because I used to actually work here at the library as well. So I'm so happy to be back and talking today about my other passion, which is history and obviously the Waupaca Historical Society. Today I brought friends, like Patsy said, and my friends are Barbara Faye Weezy. She is the Hutchison House curator, so the Hutchison House is located in South Park. We also have the King Cottage right behind there, and that's a Wisconsin Veterans Home cottage.
And an outhouse.
Oh, and an outhouse. Yeah, we should always mention the outhouse. And so Barbara Faye leads the tours over there and also takes care of the collections at the Hutchison House. And then Mike Kirk is our Historical Society Board Vice President, and he's also basically the depot volunteer. So we're happy to have both of them with us today, and we'll each kind of concentrate on the buildings that we mostly take care of. And I have my offices over at the Holly History Center, which is the original library, the Old Carnegie Library. So we'll get started. So what exactly is the Waupaca Historical Society? And that, when I took the job about a year or so ago, that was probably the question I got most often. So what exactly does the Historical Society do? Mainly, and to put it simply, our job is to preserve Waupaca's history. And we share that history with others. And how do we do that? We do that mainly through our collections. We have artifact collections and library collections. We do it through our programming and our special exhibits, which are at the Holly History Center, but also in the other buildings. And then we also have research facilities, and then we also offer tours of our facilities. And we're coming up on our busy season, which is our summer season, and all of our buildings at some point during the week will be open. So we're excited to have those open, and one of the things we're proud of too is that we offer most of those services free of charge. So anyone can come and tour our buildings and use our research facilities as well. So what exactly do we collect? If you've ever been to the Holly History Center, you'll see we have just a variety of things. And actually, it kind of depends too on the building that you go to. The depot, obviously, we have a lot of railroad collections. The Hutchison House tends to focus more on families, and we have a lot of furniture and clothing, things that would go in a typical Victorian home. At the Holly History Center, we have a mixture. We collect objects, we collect photographs, we collect archival materials, which is books, papers, anything like that. So we have a large collection, and it pertains to both the Waupaca area, but also the Chain of Lakes area. And then we collect really any time period from as far back as you could think to today. And so that's one area we're trying to actually encourage people to donate, is the objects that you have today or maybe used 5 years ago. Those are just as important in telling the Waupaca story. These items that people donate to us, we use them in exhibits. They're out for display at our buildings, and we also use them for research. And then also the items that we don't have out on display, we have in storage, and we follow archival guidelines for that. And actually last year we received a grant from the Wisconsin Historical Society to convert what was the old library office, and also our office, into a storage room. So now that place will be a space for us to preserve those materials so they last another 150 years for people to use and to see. And we also collect histories, so family histories. The Waupaca Area Genealogical Society shares our space, and so we have family histories, family books, photographs, and files at the Holly History Center for people to do more research on their families and their homes and businesses here in Waupaca. So the reason why we collect, obviously it's all important stuff, and if you love history like me, you know, you think all this stuff is very valuable, but to make it simple, the reason we collect is because of Waupaca. And Waupaca, just like many communities in Wisconsin, has a unique history. So to give you kind of a little bit of a background of the history of Waupaca, the Menominee Indians were the first residents here in our area, in the Waupaca County area, and their main home village was on the northern side of Otter Lake. so on the chain of lakes. And they moved a lot on the chain. The chain offered a variety of fishing and hunting and other food and other resources, and so there were many American Indian trails around the chain and then also coming into the city of Waupaca. And the first settlers then came in June 1849, and so the year before, in 1848, Wisconsin had become a state. And in that same year, the government had a treaty with the Menominee Indians that ceded a large chunk of their land, mainly here in Waupaca County, to the U.S. government. So people could start coming over to the Waupaca area. Now, settlers had already kind of heard rumblings of these falls in the area. And so in June 1849, a group called the Vermonters, so obviously coming from Vermont, came to Waupaca and started kind of looking around, followed the Indian trails. After they took the rivers as far as they could by steamboat and other ways, and then took the Indian trails all the way over to this area, and basically ended up kind of where on like the North Main Street area. And they immediately were drawn to the falls, just like the American Indians were as well. And they saw potential. This picture shows, so at one time, Waupaca had 4 operating dams in the city of Waupaca, harnessing the river. And so this one here is of the Power Company Dam, which is north of Water Street, which would be closer to like Elm Street now. It's one of 2 that is still remaining today. The other 4 in Waupaca were on Water Street, and then one on Shearer, which is kind of where the Fisher Fall-Gator Mill is now. They're tearing down on Old Warren and kind of in that area. And then on Churchill, as you're heading out of town over onto Highway 10 there. And so the only ones that exist now are this one and then the one on Churchill Street. And then there was also a 5th actually just out of the city limits for the Waupaca Brickyard. So the settlers immediately took to the river and really kind of built everything around it, which is why our main street sits right around the Waupaca River today. So why the name Waupaca? Well, there's a lot of ideas and thoughts as to why Waupaca was named it. A lot of people think it was Chief Waupaca, who did settle in this area around that same time. But as far as we can tell, the most solid information we have is that the Menominee word Waupaca meant pale water or Tomorrow River. So that is why Waupaca has its name and why the river is named such. And in the early days, people knew this area as Waupaca Falls. And then later on, the city was named Waupaca. And this picture, this older picture shows the Waupaca River, and that's the old State Street Bridge. Here's another picture of the Waupaca River. So this is looking like behind Main Street, and this is the way the river used to look. And let me use my little pointer here. Over here would be the Water Street Dam and the bridge that you go over to like toward the Foundry today. And you can see the white buildings here are the mills that used to be right around the river. And then in 1934, they changed kind of the route of the river here and then took out this island, or kind of moved it, and then filled in the riverbed too, so which is now Rotary Park down there. So this area looks very different today, but obviously was kind of the main start of the settlement here. So here's a few other little firsts, just to kind of give you an idea of what was going on in those first days and why we started to collect all this information about Waupaca history. The first boarding house would have been in 1849, so the very first months they were here, that was built. The first sawmill was the next year, and then the first grist mill right after that. The first post office, which had the Waupaca name, was in 1851 as well. And so to give you an idea, in that year, so 2 years after the first settlers came, there were 100 people here in Waupaca. The county was established then in that same year, and the Menominee Indians ceded their final pieces of their land to the U.S. government in 1852. So then the entire area around here would have been opened up to settlement. And Waupaca became the county seat in 1853. And the interesting thing is that Waupaca wasn't the first choice. Muckwa actually was. And that's the little town or area you drive through as on your way to New London on Royalton or on 54 heading out. And but then with a county vote, Waupaca got the vote to become the county seat. And then the Waupaca became a village in 1857, and this year is the 160th anniversary of that. And there's actually a word for that, tetracentennial. So yeah, so this year, I know the city is planning to do a little something to commemorate that this year. So 160 years since Waupaca became a village. And then Waupaca was incorporated as a city in 1875, And in that year, there were 2,000 people here. So still not a huge area, but certainly had grown quite a bit in just the 20-some years since the first settlers had come. This picture is pretty much one of the oldest pictures we have of Waupaca, and so this is 1870. And this is this is East Union Street, and so they're looking from Maine. So, use my little pointer here. This area here would be where Chase Bank is now, and this over here would be where Weasel's is, and then this area is open here. But this is just an interesting view, and then this obviously would be Courthouse Square or the library area now, and the bandstand's kind of over here. But the other interesting thing, or at least I find interesting, is that these two buildings, if you know the E.E. Brown Law Office and the Meade Bank that are over here on Jefferson, they look identical to those two buildings. So there must have been someone in Waupaca that really loved that style of frame building. This whole area ended up burning at one point and was rebuilt much like most of Waupaca. And then this is the other picture we have from 1870. And this would be looking north on Main, and this area here is where Simpson's is now, and then this is where the Rosa Theater is. And this Lewis Hotel was a popular establishment in 1870, and pretty sure that this picture was taken from like the bell tower of a church that used to sit on the corner of Main and Badger. They're kind of where that, I think it's a financial place that's there on the corner there now. So it kind of gives you an idea that even in 1870, just about 20 years after the first settlement, the downtown was really built up, and you can even see the houses being built out here too. It was already starting to get built up quite a bit. Okay. As I mentioned, there were 3 big fires in Waupaca in the 1870s that basically tore down the downtown, and then it was rebuilt. And one of the fires, which was in 1877, burned this building, which is now Main Street Marketplace. So not this building, this is actually the building that they built afterwards, but it burned down the Beatleston building and block, which would have been there. And so what they did when they had these fires, because a lot of those original buildings were wood, when they had those fires, they built them with brick, and a lot of the brick came from the Waupaca Brickyard, which is why many of the buildings have similar brick color. But they built party walls, they called it. So instead, years ago, before those fires, the buildings were placed, quite a bit apart. So animals, trash, everything was in between those buildings. When they built the downtown again, then they made these party walls, so when a new building would be built next to it, they wouldn't have to build all 4 walls again. They would build one butting right up against or attached to the next building, and they'd keep building further down, so there were no entrances between the buildings. And this was a good way to prevent fires from spreading, too. There were these walls to kind of stop the fires from spreading like they had in the 1870s. All right, so that's a little bit of the history of Waupaca, and that's the reason we do what we do with the Historical Society. But the interesting thing is that we can't always accept everything that is donated to us. We get things that are so large that we just can't take them. We were just talking about a couple items that have been asked of us in the past, and we just don't have the room. Some things we have a lot of, and we just don't have the room for multiple objects. Some things are in poor condition, but the neat thing about being kind of picky about that is that we're really focusing on Waupaca's story. We're not focusing on Wyowegas or Iolas. We're focusing on our area and the Chain of Lakes area. And but the neat thing too about getting things from other communities is that we can partner with those area historical societies and be able to share those objects with them and help them preserve their history as well. So some of the objects in our collection too are kind of seemingly usual, I guess you could say. About 2 years ago, we were cleaning out the basement below the King Cottage, which is at the Hutchinson House, and I had 2 boxes I brought over to the Holly Center, and I finally just went through them a couple months ago. And I kind of was going through boxes, and I found this notebook, and it's over there for you guys to look at afterwards. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, it's probably a homework book, or we've seen some of those where businesses in Waupaca kept their accounting on those notebooks. And so I opened it up, and this is what I found. So the very first page I opened, and I'll read it for you, it says, dated April 27th, 1953, and it says, a meeting for the purpose of organizing a Waupaca City Historical Society was held at the City Library Club Room. 26 people attended. attended. So basically, these are the very first minutes from the Historical Society being formed, and I thought it was a neat object to start with, because without the Historical Society, a lot of the things that we have likely wouldn't be still in our area, or maybe even be preserved today. And the minutes go on to talk about Miss Ophelia Kurkowski, who was a Waupaca teacher, and she was instrumental in forming with her students a lot. Actually, we had a lot of things that her and her students worked on. Booklets about the history of the street names in Waupaca, about homes in Waupaca. So she was really instrumental in starting the Waupaca Historical Society and really getting it off the ground. The rest of the notebook goes on to talk about just the logistics of forming a historical society. So this was 4 years before the Hutchison House was moved to South Park, and then that was our first facility that we had. So that was an object that seems really ordinary, but actually tells a huge story for us at the Historical Society. This is another item that I probably stared at this ribbon for a good 15 minutes trying to figure out what this image was when I first found it in the collection, and I looked and looked, and I know a little about the history, but does anybody figure out what it is on there? It's a potato, yes. Yep. So yeah, you can kind of see now like the little eyes, you know. But you know, and if you go up to the front and see this ribbon, it's only about this big. So to talk about things that are small but tell a really big piece of Waupaca history, this is a perfect example. So this ribbon is from the very first Waupaca potato bake. And that tells the story of the potato industry. And I don't know if many of you know that Waupaca at one time was the potato capital of the world. Yeah, it's hard to believe. So the first potatoes were grown in Waupaca in 1851, so not that long after the first settlers came. And they had found that the townships of Dayton and out there, the sand, the soil was really good for growing potatoes, and the potatoes actually had really good flavor. So the first potatoes were shipped out in 1872. The railroad had first arrived and been built here in 1871. So that first shipment went out the following year. By 1910, so yeah, 40 years later, Waupaca was known as the potato capital of the world. And at that time then, the Waupaca Green Bay Railroad had come into Waupaca and was the very first stop on its way to Scandinavia and then on its way to Chicago to the major potato markets. So this was the first stop for that railroad and to ship out, so at some point, millions of potatoes. And I should mention that wheat used to be the major crop here in Waupaca until 1890 when there was a fungus that went across the wheat crop. And so a lot of people here in Waupaca ended up growing potatoes, which is one of the reasons potatoes really took off here. This is a neat picture of A.M. Penny's potato warehouse in the back. Ooh, hold on, sorry about that. Back here. And he has a line here, obviously, for his potato cars. And A.M. Penny was one of 5 people that really were instrumental in the potato industry here in Waupaca. And he's probably the most well-known of all 5. And he went on to be known as the potato king of the country. He ended up having, to look at my notes here, I forget, he had, let's see, he had potato warehouses, he had his own starch factory, and he controlled the production by buying up potato farms. So he had a huge hand in the potato industry here. And he actually didn't start out in the potato industry, but he was injured and ended up kind of going into that job as like a second career. He also went on to serve as the postmaster, and then he also built the Palace Theater, which is where Farmer State Bank is now, on the corner of Fulton and Washington. And so he built that theater, and then also served as the president of the local electric company for a while too. In 1913, so just a few years after Waupaca became the potato capital of the world, Waupaca had 13 potato warehouses and 2 potato starch factories. And at that, in those best years, they would see 2,000 cars or 1 million bushels ship out of the city. And so it was a huge thing. And they actually had buyers from Chicago and from all these huge cities in the country here in Waupaca from early time for the potato crop till the fall here to buy potatoes. So you'd have these cars or these trailers lined, or the carts lined on Main Street, and these buyers would be out there buying all these potatoes. And Eventually in the 30s and 40s, potato farming went away with the Depression and dairy farming took over, which is primarily what you saw in those later years then. But the potato industry really helped to put Waupaca on the map in a lot of ways. So the community, in that way, rallied around the potato industry. And so in 1908, they decided to have their first Waupaca potato bake. And they had farm exhibits, they had potatoes, obviously. They had a meal, a barbecue beef, they had a parade, they even had a balloon go up. And actually through the years, it even got more elaborate. They had an illuminated parade at night one time. So it just kept getting bigger and bigger. As far as we can tell, it lasted 5 years, we think they did it. And then it kind of went away. I expect that it was quite a thing to put on every year. And then in 2015, they started doing the Sputter Mini Open here in town on Main Street, where they have the mini golf. And that's kind of a reincarnation of the Waupaca potato bake. So it's kind of a way of doing it again today, and to showcase that potato history. So here's a postcard that I found of the potato bake, that very first one. And there's Main Street, and this would be where Main Street Marketplace is today. So this is the corner of Main and Fulton. And the interesting thing is, I believe this is the baggage car for the trolley that we have at the depot. There it is. That was from the Waupaca Electric Railway. And this banner up here says, Waupaca potato is king. And you see that giant picture of that potato again. But you can see it was a huge community event to have this potato bake. Everybody came out for it. So the potato bake was an interesting thing too, because it really got businesses in Waupaca involved. And one of the businesses that was involved in the potato bake was Christie's, which is right here. And that is where True Value was, and now the Antiques on Main is. And Christie's had promotions for many years, while potatoes were still a big thing in Waupaca, where if you brought in your receipt and you had sold so many potatoes, they would actually give you money. And they'd also have potato displays, and they would have all sorts of things, memorabilia. But Christie's was also known for giving out a lot of giveaways. So in our collection, and you can see it when you come up here later, we have quite a few things from Christie's. They gave away, I think we have a shoehorn, we have like a pumice stone with Christie's name on it, and the one thing I'll show you is we have a calendar, which was a common advertisement for businesses. But J.E. Christie's department store had a really neat history here in Waupaca, and it was a very popular store during its time. It opened in 1904, and it was very successful right off the bat. And in the 1930s, it had some difficult times, so they decided to lease half of their store here to Gamble's, which was a hardware store. And so that's what they did, and eventually when Christie's kind of fell off, Gamble's used the entire building, and that's what it was for many, many years, until True Value then took over as a hardware store in that building. And like I said, they had many giveaways. I'll just grab one quick here that I was going to show. This is one, and it says J.E. Christie Dry Goods on top. So they sold everything you could think of: clothing, shoes, hats, all sorts of things in their store. And so this was one giveaway. The calendar has since fallen off here, but would have been down on the bottom. And just a nice little art portrait. And I think the picture says 1905. Yep. So this would have been actually probably in its very first years of being a store. So when you come on up, you can take a look at that as well. So the Waupaca businesses actually give us a lot of artifacts in our collection. And that's the neat thing, is that we do have a lot of things. We're always looking for more, especially as businesses leave Main Street or Waupaca, to be able to collect some of those artifacts. We were just talking about Tom Thumb Mini Golf. They've been here for so long, but we don't actually have anything in the collection from them. And so trying to single out those businesses that we can find neat artifacts to be able to preserve in our collection. They tell such an interesting story of Waupaca. And this is another one that tells a great story, is the Drevis Ice Cream Parlor. And I don't know if any of you will remember Drevis's drugstore, which was a Rexall drugstore, and was in business for 80 years downtown. But it started out as a candy kitchen at 111 North Main Street, and that is the building. It sits empty now, but it was I&I Printing. And so that one sits on the west side of North Main Street. So it opened in 1911. It was opened by George Drevis. and his brother James, both who were, had emigrated from Greece. And then they made homemade candies, that was their specialty, and they had ice cream and other treats there. And then their brother, Angelos, who was 16, he decided to come from Greece to work with his brothers. And the interesting story about Angelos is that he could speak no English. So when he came from Greece, he met family in New York that were already here, and they actually put a sign on him to wear on the train that told people who he was and where he was going, and then he was supposed to get off in Waupaca, Wisconsin. And he, at miracle, he did get here. But I mean, different time, right? So Angelos joined them, and they all were in business together. World War I came, and they ended up closing the store for a little while, and George ended up dying of influenza, but Angelos came back because he actually was had a disability, so he could not serve. So he and James went back into business and opened it up, and they continued kind of the ice cream store, the ice cream parlor, and the candy, but they decided to tear down the building and build a new one, which is why this building looks very different than the one that's there now. So they actually tore it down and built a new one. And then Angelos actually had 3 children, and George Drevis, his George, was the one that ended up taking over Drevis's, and he went to pharmacy school and then opened a drugstore. And eventually it became Rexall Drugstore, and it was open until 1991. So 80 years of the Drevis family having a business here in town. And there's another, and there's an advertisement or a calendar over there of the Drevis Drugstore that we have from our collection that you can take a peek at later on as well. And so this is a very recognizable building, and it has been in the news a lot lately because they're restoring it now. But this is an example, actually, a building and a business or organization that we don't have much about at all, even though it has such a prominent spot on North Main Street. The Danes' home has been there for over 100 years, but we have, I think the Danes' home itself has one picture of the inside. We're still looking through our collections to see if we can find any. But, which is amazing because they had high school dances there, they had programs there, they had all sorts of things. But we have so very little pictures of the inside of that building. To give you an idea of the history of that building, the first meeting of the Danish immigrants was in 1877, and it actually started off with an immigrant, Rasmus Sorensen, and he had come to Waupaca in 1854, so not too long after those first settlers, and he realized when he got here that he was the only Danish person in town. So he decided to go back to Denmark and recruit people to come back with him, and that's what he did. He got people to come back, and that's when they started to form, years later, the Danish Society. And it actually formed initially to hopefully keep these former railroad employees that had now moved to live in Waupaca, to keep them out of the saloons. So their idea was to form this Danish Society, except they had rules. And you had to be 18, you had to be born to Danish parents, you had to be a man, and you had to be able to read and speak Danish. Then you were eligible to be part of the Danish Society. In 1882, they purchased this lot, and they actually moved the very first courthouse down there, and then put it on that location. And that served them fine until 1894, and they were just outgrowing their space. So they moved that courthouse to over on Water Street, really close to the river there, and it's been since torn down. But then they decided to build this building, designed by William Waters, who's a famous architect from Oaxaca, and it actually they moved the original courthouse in August 1894, and this was done in November. And it cost them just over $6,800 to build. So, and the building, when it was used as a Danish society home, it was unbelievable. It had a lodge room, library, theater, dance hall. It had libraries. It had a women's and men's study room. It had, it was huge. And obviously, it had the dance hall up here, which they're busy renovating as well. But then down in the basement level, they had a coffee house, they had a confectionery. It was quite the place when it was in its heyday. And then, like most of you probably know, it was an antique store most recently, and then now they're renovating it to hopefully use it as a community space in years to come. All right. So that gives you a little ideas to some Waupaca history and some idea of the things that we collect at the Holly Center. And the Hutchison House really was the beginning of the Historical Society in a lot of ways. It was moved in 1957 to South Park as part of Waupaca Centennial. And it was opened as our museum, and that was our office museum for many years. And this is a picture from 1957 when it was first opened, and I believe this is the formal parlor. Is that the picture? And I'll let Barbara Faith tell you a little bit more about the collections at the Hutchinson House.
Good afternoon, and we're happy to see this. I was happy to see this little picture. This happens to be at the Holly Center. We don't have this picture at the Hutchinson House, but it shows you in 1957, in fact before 1957, the Historical Society had set out a request to the people of Waupaca to please look over their furnishings at home and donate, if they would, whatever things they could for furnishing the Hutchinson House as a Victorian historic house. So these are some of the early things that we received. And in fact, the city was very generous in not only in the quantity of things that they gave, but in the quality of items that they gave also. And in this picture, some of the things we see, there's the rocking chair there was Julia Hutchinson's rocking chair. Now, we're not sure if her father, George Hutchinson, had used that, or her grandparents, but we know certainly she had it in the house when she was there. It has a matching couch, which you don't see right in this picture. There also is a lovely tall desk there that you can see, and a little old organ. You can see a center table, which was very common in the Victorian times. And so this, and another thing that I'd like you to notice here in this picture is the rug on the floor. And that is, in 1957, or as they were getting the house ready, there were a number of women who volunteered to weave these rag rugs, and they made, if you have to come to the Hutchinson House to see this, but they made full floor carpet, wall-to-wall carpets for the formal parlor, the greeting room, and the informal parlor. So these were made in 1957, but as we know, time marches on. So these are getting to be historical. They certainly are historical, and the fact that these ladies came and volunteered and sewed them and installed them is historical. So just about everything we can do is historical, and this tells a story because these rugs are still, it's 60 years later, and these rugs are still good. Now, one of them is in a little less repair than the other, so one of our current concerns is how do we preserve that rug while people are walking on it. So we're going to be doing some kind of covering, thinking of what we can do with that. But history doesn't just sit in one place. It moves on. And so this picture kind of includes two different segments, the Victorian era and then a time when people still did that rag rug. How many people here weave rag rugs like that? Still a couple here who weave rag rugs like that. My grandmother had them in her home, and she gave them, I had them in my early home. So that's what I really like about this picture. It shows both the progress of history. So, now did you say this one? Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is the way the room looks now. And there's some differences and some similarities. So I'd like you to kind of play that game of what's different between these two things. What's something that you notice that's different?
Lamp is off the center table.
The lamp is off the center. That's right. Actually, we have flowers now on the center table, and they are so big that they sort of covered everything else up. I took that off. The chair is there. What's not there? The organ is in another room. That is the couch that matches the chair. And of course, that actually is a different, a large different desk that's sitting there. And we expand from the Hutchinson family to the Mumbrue family. That picture above the couch is a picture of Harmon and Betsy Mumbrue. We do not have any pictures of Chester and Susanna Hutchinson. Something may turn up, and we'd love to have it if something does. But this is Harmon and Betsy Mumbrue, and they contributed the lovely bed set that we have upstairs. The bed, which was a double bed at the time, and people come and look at it now and say, that's a very small bed. And then there is the men's dresser, which is smaller than the ladies' dresser because, of course, the lady had many more layers of things that she had to put on. But so this is another family. And something also that you do not see that's out of the picture over on the left is our tilting water cooler set, which is something that we have. Again, you're going to have to come and see it. It's really beautiful, and you don't find them too many places. Okay. And then now, whoops, I have to pay attention to what I'm doing. This is the greeting room, and the greeting room is the first room that you come into. You'll see there's a different pattern in the rug here. The ladies were very creative. This is that little desk that was in the formal parlor before. And the small desk that you see over on the left there is from the council room. And it was in town hall. And there is a small little inkwell that is fixed right into that desk. There's something very small. I'm not sure you can see it. See if I can do anything here to... Right over there, that is totally out of time, and that is a telephone, which actually is totally out of time now also, because we don't have a telephone like that at the Hutchinson house. So time marches on. Oops. That's the desk that was in the front room. Oh my God. Okay. This is our informal parlor now. And I'm showing this. We have, the organ is just off the left, on the wall to the left. So the organ has moved to the informal parlor. We have many large pieces of furniture that people have donated, and we have many smaller things too. Up above the desk there is a sampler. We have a lot of samplers from various families who have lived in Waupaca. So if samplers is your thing, please do come to the Hutchinson house, and we have a lot of beautiful ones for you to see. Now, right above the sewing machine there are two little black squares. And what is in those little black squares is a button collection. So not only do we like large things, and we're kind of at I'd say we're kind of at our peak of what we can accept with large furniture, but we still look for smaller things. And this is a very nice button collection. And you have to look very closely to really understand what is in this little collection if you're going to notice the special things that are there. Now the badge in the center here says United States Census 1900. And they needed to wear a badge so that they could identify themselves, and people knew that the person who was coming to the door, because the census was taken by going door to door, so you had to know that the person who was coming into your door was supposed to be getting this information from you. They wore those badges. And the two pinbacks are from World War I Liberty Loan Program. Between 1917 and 1919, over $2 billion, that's with a B, were collected in money for the war effort, which we now call World War I. And the loan program was, they needed to raise money, but they also wanted to gather support for the war effort. So the loans, you could purchase a loan between $5 and $100 because they wanted as many families as possible to be able to contribute. And over half of the families in the country did, many families from Waupaca. And then they also had loans in levels up to $10,000 for wealthy people and for the banks. So they did get over $20 billion with that. Now we'll move on to some more small items. The store giveaways, as we had talked about before, Tracy mentioned, store giveaways have been going on since this was a community. And there certainly have been many that we have collected. This is a wonderful little egg separator. Separate the yolk from the white. And the Ice and Coal Company, National Ice and Coal, is the one who gave it. Now, there were a lot of kitchen items that were giveaways because if you gave a woman something she could use in the kitchen and was using every day, then you stayed in her thought. And that would be, she'd keep you in mind while she was going about her daily baking and all. And these little items continue through today. I have a few more here from back. This was strictly not Victorian. We do try to have the things at the Hutchinson House be from the Victorian era. However, we do want to collect beyond that time because it's all history. Today is history. Tomorrow will be history. This is from probably the 30s or 40s. And I love this little item. You put it in your milk bottle when you wanted extra items on, and the milkman who came by would pick it up and see what you needed. What I like especially, I find about this is the tab that is blue, that little blue tab there, is for chocolate drink. They don't call it chocolate milk, they call it chocolate drink. And they also refer to whipping cream and coffee cream. But please be aware of things that as you go through your miscellany drawer, as you're cleaning out drawers or closets or attic or whatever, if you find something, even if it's a little thing, you might think, oh, here's a matchbook or a comb or a whatever from some business that used to be in town. Really, we would like those things because those tell a story. And they're small enough that we can collect them. So any things that you find from businesses, we're happy to receive. This is a little dish, a little saucer, and I held it so you can see the size it actually is. Although the fair store did give away things that were plates and larger items, smaller items were given away also. And this is from a meat market, and they were well represented in our collection, but we definitely need something from Nemeth's. So we need something from over the years at Nemeth's. This is a collection of, I have the little box here, you can look through. Some of them I have them set out. Arm & Hammer and Cow baking soda would get these little sets, and you could send for them. This wasn't strictly a giveaway, but they made these sets up that you could purchase, and it was Useful Birds of America. They had at least, we have at least 10 series that are represented, and the first series that we have is number 3. And in that third series, they still had a little Arm & Hammer symbol on the front of the card of the bird, which they dropped in later times. But this is what it said partly on the back. They had a big description about the bird, and then they said, a full set of cards, 30 in all, will be sent on receipt of 6 cents in coin or stamps. Please have your name and post office address plainly written. If you want the best baking soda, be sure and buy the Arm & Hammer brand baking soda. If bicarbonate soda is needed for home remedies, use the Arm & Hammer brand, which you should have on your pantry shelf or in the medicine closet. everyone knows the package and the brand. So that was on the back of one of them. On the back of another one, they had little tips for how to use Arm & Hammer baking soda. And one of them is, double boilers are easily freed from food particles if soaked with baking soda in water. And my favorite, you might be able to use this when you go home today or in the weeks ahead. 1/2 teaspoonful of baking soda to 1 quart of sweet milk prevents curdling when milk is used for ham or pork chops and scalloped dishes. So you can use that little bit of information. This is a fan. Now fans were, sorry, let's go back here. Okay, fans were another very popular giveaway. And they were very frequently, churches would give them away, funeral homes would give them away. In this case, it was a meat market that gave this away. And it is the Charles McLean and Son. And the phone number has only 2 digits, so I don't know if it's from an earlier time than the 4-digit telephone numbers, or if they just started at 1 and went up to 4 digits, whichever. But so they were located in what was called the Bank Block, and proudly claimed to be the only market. And the fans, as I say, were especially given away by churches and funeral homes because they tended to get hot and people tended to get excited or emotional in those places, so they often had fans. This has this poem on the back, and it's called The Only Market. It's an acrostic, which means the letters down, I kind of have it tilted there, but all of the letters of the lines vertically spell the word butchers. So, bologna white, bologna right, bologna round and brown. United here is high-class cheer in meats, the best in town. There's tenderloin well worth your coin, porterhouse the same, chickens, lamb, pork chops and ham, and many kinds of game. Here is the place to feed your face, but you must cook it first. Everything from fall till spring, from fish to Winniewurst. Ribs to spare, spare ribs for fare, liver, hearts, and tongue. Sausage too and bacon true. Trade here and don't be stung. So you got to fan your face and think of all those meats at the same time. This is one of the fans from one of the funeral homes. And it's quite an elaborate example. It has it moves out into 3 parts. And so I think it could be, you could maybe take it in your coat, but you could, in your pocketbook, but you could open it up for better fanning. And the message on the back is Bammel's Furniture and Funeral Services. So it's a very simple message on the back, but the image would be very comforting. Now, these items are not strictly giveaways, but they really tell a story. They're small, and they were used a lot by the Victorians especially. Stereopticons cards tell us a great deal about Waupaca's history. Many people had pictures of their homes taken, sometimes with a group of people in front of them, to send to relatives and friends. And when you look through the stereopticon, the images would appear to be in 3D. So this is an example of a home. The other thing is the Victorians loved travel. And so they would, the stereopticons also were their form of being able to travel different places. Now, as far as getting them locally, you can see here that the Perkins Art Studio, I think, you had the slide with the Perkins, it said Perkins Art Studio. I think it was actually the Perkins Photographic Art Studio. And we have a number of stereopticon cards from that studio. So this is one way that we can almost see 3-dimensionally again. And you don't, here was something I actually guess with the back of this item. We'll go back here a second. We're very grateful that people put on here things like the church that it was, or what, where it was or when, because that all really is very important information. And it really helps us in telling where things are and when. So we know that this is the Episcopal Church, and it's all decorated for a fall festival. Of course, there were the two pictures, and if you look at it through the stereopticon, it looks very three-dimensional. Here's another. This is the Baptist Church, and the minister there is Mr. McCutcheon. And that information was on the back, so we're very happy for that too. This is an example. Anybody been here to Balmoral Castle in Scotland? They learned about Africa and, well, I don't know about Africa, actually. We have things though from Alaska and from all different countries. This was how the Victorians really learned about different places. Now, we really would like to keep the history of Waupaca going, so I brought a couple of things also that are, I don't have slides for them, but they are from dates beyond the Victorian era. We have a glass there that is when the fountain was the Centennial Fountain was dedicated. There's an iron there that is from the foundry. And it says Bud did it on the side. And it's from when Bud owned the foundry. And that's a really wonderful, that tells a wonderful story. So whatever things you can contribute that are from either particular to your family, and we would love to have family stories about how your family came to Waupaca, how they maybe left and you've come back. We need all of this because all of this is part of our history. So now I'll let, we'll go on and talk about how people came and left.
Hello, I'm Mike Kirk. I'm in charge of the railroad depot, and I won't talk too long because I know it's getting late. And Tracy was just talking about the history of potatoes, and before I talk about the depot, I want to talk a little bit about potato history. My dad died in 1971, and some model railroad guys got me interested in model railroading and stuff. And one of the guys was named Cliff Devereaux, and he was a retired guy, lived in Waupaca, and he was a World War I veteran. And he talked about, he was in the Army, and he was over there, and he was coming back on his ship, finally getting back home from World War I after spending all this time over there fighting the war. And his ship was coming in to New York in the harbor, and as he was coming in, he saw some Waupaca AM penny potato cars in New York. So he knew that he was finally getting back home from fighting at the war. He was really happy to see those. And another thing that Cliff said was, when he was a young man himself, he worked on the baggage car of the Waupaca trolley line. And right soon after he died, we were able to get the baggage car for the Model Railroad Club at that time. And we were working on the inside of the car. The inside had been painted. It was made into a cabin, a hunting and fishing cabin. And in one of the spots, they had taken a crate and made a cabinet on the wall for the kitchen supplies. We took that crate off the wall, and here was written Orton Clifford Devereaux on the wall. He had written that name on that car when he was working on there back in the early 1900s. So we knew I had the right car with his name on there. Anyway, I'll talk a little bit about the, we got to press this arrow here, this one? Let's see what. So we started, before I actually got really involved with the Historical Society, we were trying to buy the depot from the railroad. We had known it was for sale, and we heard it was for sale for $16,000, and just put up a fence and leave it where it is. So my sister actually contacted them, and we found out that the railroad decided they wanted it moved, so things were a little more complicated. And I was working with the city a little bit on it, Henry Velliker and John Elbeck, and they said we should work with the Historical Society on trying to get it. So we did. And it's kind of a long story just buying the depot, and I won't say much of that, but we worked with them. It took us until 2004 to actually get them to sell us the depot without moving it. In the meantime, I bought the freight house myself, which is across the street. But finally, things changed, and we were able to buy the depot. And by that time, it was the Historical Society that had bought it, because it was a little easier to just work with the Historical Society than just do it on our own. A lot easier. So here's an early picture of the depot with a passenger train when it was still Wisconsin Central. You can see the driveway going up the hill there, steep driveway. Okay, then one of the really important things about passenger trains was the mail. And this, for a number of years, they had this extra little shelter here covering, for the mail carts. The baggage carts would be able to hold the mail. So that's gone now, but that shows that there. In the later years, earlier passenger trains, was all about moving the people before there was automobiles and planes and everything. But as time went on, later on, the baggage and the mail especially became very important for the passenger trains. And once they lost the mail business, that's kind of when passenger trains quit. So Tracy said I should bring a few items having to do with the depot to talk about. So that's what I did. And there's some things up there. And this is the office in the depot in 1960 while it was still in use. The last passenger train was 1965. So you can see some of the things, there's a pointer on this thing here? Yep. Up on the top?
Yep. There you go.
Okay, this is a telegraph sounder right here. So we have a sounder. Here's the telegraph sounder. It's in the box for so the sound could work. You could project the sound a little better, make it louder. And then there's a telephone right here. I know I'm not talking into the microphone.
You don't want me to hold this stuff up?
Sure. And here we have a scissors telephone of the same style. It's not the one from the depot, but it's of that same style. That pulls out. I can see there it is. There it is right there in the picture. I can't remember what all the pictures she put on here. Okay, now, for railroad communications, you would get the telegraph message to the depot, but they had to get the message from the depot to the trains. So you would have this Y here. Yeah, and there's a Form 19 message on there. It's a train order hoop is what it's called. The early ones were actually a hoop, like this. And there's a little clip down in there where you clip the message to. So you put the message in that clip, and then the guy in the train, one in the engine, another in the caboose, they would hold their arms out of the window of the train and stick their arms through there as the train was moving along. And then they had to quickly grab the message off the hoop and throw the hoop back down. But the problem was sometimes the train would be down the track a ways and the agent at the depot would have to go running after the hoop. So then they made this kind with a string on. So when they reached their arm through there, the string would just pull off of the hoop, and they would just put on a new string each time. One of the only things left over from the depot days that was still at the depot when we got it, the depot had been really totally trashed, was two of these train order hoops with the handles broken off, and this is one of them. So this is one from the Waupaca depot. This other one might have been from the Waupaca depot. We're not sure because it was something the grandson of one of the Waupaca depot agents had, and his family had passed it down. So it very well could have been. But I put this picture up here because it shows the Sioux line hoops, with the yellow paint and the exact same hoops. This one is one on a stand. Sometimes they were made with long handles for the guy to hold on to when the train went by, and sometimes they put on a stand like this so they didn't have to stand out there. But the upper one was for the engine and the lower one was for the caboose. Okay, this is Louis Siebert. He was a depot agent in Waupaca for a long, long time. He worked for the railroad for 40-some years. 20-some of those years he spent right here at the Waupaca Depot. And it was actually his grandson that gave us that one train order hoop. And Lewis's son, Doug Sieber, there's his telegraph, that's the box, but the telegraph key that went in the box, the agents had their own keys. So he didn't have, and his son Doug was also a railroad telegrapher. And Doug didn't have his dad's key, but he had his own, which he donated to the Historical Society. So that's the one we have there. And we actually have 4 different telegraph keys now. One from Walter Dean, who was one of the last agents in the depot. I also have an earlier type of a telegraph key. If we had more time, we could spend talking all about railroad telegraphy. It's pretty fascinating in itself, just the history of railroad communications. So then there's also a lantern there, which, yeah, that one. The guys on they would use it for signals. They would wave the lanterns different ways to show different things. Different colors of lanterns meant different things too. So you got all these different types of railroad communications. That one, those green forms there, that's the Form 19, which will go in the train order hoop. And I thought it was kind of interesting. They're on really thin paper, and the reason for the thin paper was because if you were in a steam engine at night or in the caboose with just a lantern, you could hold up that thin paper to the fire in the steam engine, and we could look through that at the orders or through the lantern, and you could read it. So they use that type of paper. Okay, I guess that's about what we have on here for depot things. But we have a lot of things at the depot, and it's really interesting. Like I say, we have the baggage car, and we have a caboose there, which is Milwaukee Road, it's a different railroad, but it actually relates to Waupaca Depot because the Sioux Line bought the Milwaukee Road, and then they made what's called Lake States, and they used that caboose came over on the Lake States, which came through here. So come and see that caboose. Is pretty fascinating inside. And actually myself, across the street at the freight house, I have a Masabi caboose, which you can also see, which I'm in the process of restoring. And the other thing we're getting right now, we've actually purchased, but it's not here yet, is we have the last existing Sioux Line potato car. We found it was still in existence in Cameron, Wisconsin. It was pretty well known by the Sioux Line historic people. It was sitting behind it still is, behind a service station, an old service station there, used as a storage building. But the people that owned it wanted to redevelop the site and do something with the car. And then another guy who was interested in railroad history from Minnesota bought the car just with the idea of preserving it because he didn't want to see it get demolished or scrapped. But he didn't really want to keep it himself. So other Sioux Line historians, we talked about Waupaca being a potato industry place and how we're doing work on the depot and preserving that. So we bought it from the guy in Minnesota, and it's not moved here yet. And the guy in Minnesota is arranging for the moving, and I keep getting a hold of him, trying to wonder when it's going to come. So hopefully pretty soon we'll see that last existing Sioux Line potato car. We'll have that as part of our exhibit. The depot is going to be open this summer and on weekends from noon till 5, Saturdays and Sundays, and also extra hours on holidays and different events. There's a lot of different things happening there. We just had another wedding there. It's the second one we've had there. And we had the Chamber After 5 was just there, and a morning mixer, and a young professionals group, and just all different things. And I guess the library is going to be doing something in June there, some kind of a children's reading thing. That'll be fun. So either watch for different events or come to the regular hours, or if you're interested yourself, at the depot or at the Holly Center in the basement, we have the meeting rooms, which are available for rent, and that helps us a lot because it's not cheap keeping the Historical Society going. And we're pretty reasonable with our prices, and we're happy to see the buildings used. So if you have anything you want to have there. Oh, and I should mention, this Thursday at 6 o'clock, there's going to be a talk about the history of the Green Band Western, the last year of the Green Band Western by a guy named John Gruber. He's got a really good speaker. That's Thursday at 6 o'clock up at the depot. You're welcome to come to that, join us at that program. And so I guess that's about what I got. I won't try to hold you any longer. Come and see us there, and we can talk to you for hours.
one thing I forgot to show you when I was talking about the Danes home, and you can come up and check out these things when we're all done here, is the reason I had the Danes home up there too was that I had brought this. This is something that was donated to us last year, and it's one of the original switches to turn on the power at the Danes home. So it kind of gives you a different idea as to things people have donated. And someone found this at a rummage sale in Waupaca. So and on the back was taped a thing that said used at the Danes home, and it was the old switch. So kind of a neat thing, and you wouldn't always think of something like this being saved, but someone thought ahead and saved it. So now we have a little piece of the Danes home with us here. So if there aren't any questions, feel free to come on up. Oh, Jeff, what a wonderful question, Jeff. Jeff asked if there are any model trains at the depot. Yes, there are. It's wonderful that you knew that. Actually, Jeff and Mike help run those model trains. And what was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now? They dug out the basement. The depot originally didn't have a basement. It had partially a walk down on the one side of the depot. And Mike and Jeff and volunteers dug that all out underneath. And now that's open, and we have model trains running around the room down there. And yeah, it's a wonderful space, and it'll just keep growing. We have a woman painting the scenery around right now, and she should be done in the next couple months. And we have a setup right now, and we hope to add more in the future. But when you come visit at the depot, that area downstairs is open as well.
Bring your family, the kids love to see the trains.
Yeah, my boys, yeah, would like to live there, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, Peg. Yeah, no. And we get that question a lot because, yeah, I mean, Christie's not a very common name around in this area here. But yeah, completely different family.
No, it's the same. It's the same family.
I should say, I mean, if you're talking about the original Christies, I should say, the Christies that live in the house now are not the same Christies.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, maybe. But yes, the ones who built the house. Yes, that is the same family. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so it's kind of interesting that a Christie family lives in that house, but it's a different Christie family. So yeah. So thanks for asking. Yeah. And that house obviously is a gem in the community, and so many of those houses on Lake Street are as well, and have just a wonderful history and a lot of connections to those names we mentioned. Penny on Main Street has a home, so a lot of those families are connected to some of the homes that are still around today. So yeah, no, you were right. You were right. Any other questions at all? Well, feel free to come on up and check out the artifacts we have, and if you have any other further questions, let us know.